Well, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's attended today for our session. And on a day like today, while our turnout might seem a bit shallow, I think that it's very important that this was given. The importance of mental health as it relates to being in the classroom can never be overstated. It's simply always just passed to the wayside, and many of us struggle with this in such an important topic, an area of concern, especially in the classrooms, and the stigma attached to it. So I want to thank the panel for attending and sharing your expertise as well. And I would like to first say personal introductions after I read your names out. First would be Melissa Desert.
Yes.
And that's from Bradley University. Lisa Fix Griffin from Bradley University. Amy Daxenbichler from Illinois Central College. Heidi Van Hollen from the Center Prevention Abuse.
No.
Jay Raoul from UICOMP.
University of Illinois, College of Medicine.
Thank you. And Dan Kelts from Illinois Central College as well. And what I'll do at this point is to go ahead, if you each can take a turn and introduce yourself formally to the group that's here today, and you can expand where I'm unable to. And then I will go ahead after that and we'll take questions, and then I do have some questions as well.
Sure. I'll start. My name is Heidi Van Hollen. I'm the clinical director at the Center for Prevention of Abuse. We are primarily located out of Peoria, Illinois, although we have outreach services in the community in Tazewell, Woodford, and Peoria counties. And we are your local domestic violence and sexual assault agency. So we are funded by state, federal, and local grants. And all of the counseling and therapy services that we provide are free to those who walk through our doors. So we don't need to worry about billing insurance or number of sessions or things along those lines. We're really just focusing from that first interaction with the client on what the needs are, and working with them throughout until they feel that they have resolved their issues. So we can provide individual counseling, we provide medical advocacy services in all of our local emergency rooms. We respond 24 hours a day for a survivor that may be in the ER, to be there with them and answer questions through their process there. And then we provide court advocacy services to help that person if they need a protective order, or if there's a criminal case at all. We'll be with them through that process as well.
Thank you. Dan?
Hi, how you doing? My name is Dan Kelts, and I'm with Illinois Central College. First of all, I want to welcome you. And seriously, you know what? Sometimes a crowd is a crowd, and an audience is an audience, and with this small audience, I hope to hear soon from you, what do you want from this? What do you hope to walk out of here with? And how you're going to use that. And I hope that I and my colleagues here can help you with that. I am the chairman of the Department of Psychology at Illinois Central College. I'm also the director of the Drug and Alcohol Counselor Training Program, DACT. I've been doing that for 20 years. I'm celebrating the 20th year of new interns beginning their 4th semester of training. And so as a part of that, I've been working in the community, community mental health, the Human Service Center, actually all of the major mental health centers and drug treatment provision centers in the catchment area. Pretty good sized area in this part of the state. So work with a lot of that. I also am a teacher. I teach from introductory through research statistics and then the DACT courses. So I interact with students in a lot of different ways.
Heidi?
I'm Lisa Fix Griffin. I'm from Bradley University. I work at the Health Services Counseling Center there. Those services are available to any enrolled students there, and I've been there about 10 years, and prior to that I worked at OSF St. Francis Eating Disorders Program for 20 years, so that's my specialty area.
I'm Melissa Desert, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and a certified alcohol and drug counselor as well. I currently work at Bradley University and do mental health counseling there. And I also am a contractual therapist at True North Solutions, where it's a part of Human Service Center of Fayette Companies, and I've been there since 1996, I think. I've worked in women's residential, men's outpatient, a dual diagnosis program. I currently do individual and family therapy for all kinds of issues, but I also work with a Suboxone clinic as well at True North, which is working in the substance abuse for people with an opiate addiction. And so I get to work with a lot of students in both of those roles and capacities. Primarily at Bradley, we see only students, and so I'm glad to be here. So thanks for having us.
I'm Amy Daxenbichler. I'm the counseling coordinator here at Illinois Central College. I want to thank everybody for coming, the panel and the group that's here. I am in the counseling department, so we do have counseling available here on campus. We do brief solution focused counseling, so we only see students for 3 to 5 sessions typically, but we do referrals out into the community as well. So if anyone on campus, if you identify anybody who has any mental health concerns, please feel free to send them our way. We have 3 counselors here at this campus and 1 at the Peoria campus.
Hi, my name is Jay Raoul. I'm a 4th-year general psychiatry resident at the University of Illinois College's Medicine Peoria. It's based at Unity Point Health Methodist for the most part. I see patients both inpatient and the outpatient. I guess my expertise would be in therapy and also psychopharmacologic management as well. At our residency, we do have a combined approach, which goes from psychotherapy to psychopharmacologic management, and I see just about all ages of patients and clients.
Thank you very much. Forgive me earlier, because I guess maybe I just got caught up, but I'm Professor Anthony White. I teach criminal justice and sociology at ICC over the past several years, as well as I have a strong familiarity as well with mental health. I teach mental health first aid here as well. I can attest to Amy and Dan's commitment to mental health issues within the classroom, as both of them over the past several years, I've contacted them when I've had issues. It is a recurring problem and one that doesn't go away, and I like to call it an issue rather than a problem. And the stigma that goes with it, it's really sad for many students that just will not come forward. And the prevalency of this far exceeds our imagination because people hide and they're afraid. But you're here today, and like Dan said, who's a really personal friend of mine as well, it's just so important. I don't care how big the audience is. If you hear us, you take it out with you. You know, many people will preach these pious pontifications about mental health and how much, you know, they're all on board to helping and assisting and to helping these people live a better quality of life. But when it comes down to it, they're laughing at the people that are made fun of in movies and books and friends. And until it comes close to home to you, it doesn't have the same impact. But when so many of us suffer in our community, that's also in our homes. And so I strongly am so grateful to each and every one of you for coming here today to share your expertise, your personal knowledge, and your professional knowledge, because this is what it takes to move this information forward, not just all of these pontificating and doing nothing with it. I'm so tired of that, only to go out and hear someone make jokes and further stigmatize and alienate those people so dear to us. So with that being said, I'm going to open the floor to questions, and please feel free. Let's just do it some justice, as it is recorded, and it will be played by other people. You know, it's just the end of the day, and we're not going to apologize for it. We're just going to do what we came here to do and be successful at it.
Can I say one thing, Anthony? So Lisa and I work together at Bradley, and this is another role that we oftentimes play. When we work at Bradley, we carry an on-call phone for students when they are in crisis or in distress. And we get calls from the housing department, we get calls from the Bradley Police Department, we get calls from the administration, and our students also have access to a 24-hour, they go through the OSF nursing hotline. And so they call there, the nurse triages them, and then they transfer the phones. And so during the off break, during our breaks, we are only open halftime. So her after hours started at noon today. so you got to see it in action, the work happening. And so sometimes those calls come at 1 o'clock in the morning, which makes for a not so bright 8 a.m. Time. But, you know, so they can come at any time. And our students and the campus providers certainly use this access and call us as needed. So those calls can come at any time after hours. So she apologizes, I'm sure, for being called out of the room.
Sure, that's not even an issue. We're professionals, that's great. But who'd like to open up with a question?
So I work in access services, and we see a lot of students with mental health come through our office for services. I also am an instructor here in the business department, and so I see, I work with students on different capacities. What would be the best way to approach a student in a class, in one of my classes, if I thought they may be suffering from some kind of, I don't know, maybe a problematic or a symptom, of mental health, like how should I approach the student, to get them in contact with me? Like how would I do that? What would be your best advice for approaching a student?
I think one of the first things is that you have to choose your battles with that. A student who, they may be dealing with or suffering from a variety of different issues, whether they're functional, just basic adjustment kinds of things, personality issues, or, other more serious things. If I become aware of or am concerned about a student who maybe has an issue, if it's not something that seems to be interfering with their ability to be a student, if it's not interfering with their ability to participate in the class or other students' abilities to stay focused, participate in the class, I may choose, this isn't, my business unless that student demonstrates a need for an intervention or possibly may ask for, and often psychology professors get that a lot. Especially when you talk about certain units. You start to talk about the personality theories, the disorders chapters, and things like that. You may get people who invite themselves for help. But, sometimes the best thing to do is that if it's not an issue, don't make it an issue. And that's one of the things I teach my clinical students. Never give a person a problem they don't need to have.
In the past, I've just had students not be able to show up to class. So they respond with an email, like, I'm just having a lot of anxiety today, so I will have to excuse the student 2 or 3 times. And then eventually, as you know, as being an instructor here, we have the non-attenders, eventually it does become a problem, and then I will give them the out to say maybe you should possibly drop the class, and I would be willing to sign a late withdrawal for them, so, they don't, suffer the consequences too much on that negative end. But then later, they wanted to do an appeal, and then I've been asked to get involved and to write something. So, I guess the one problem that I've seen from the previous semester I had was just parents or students that suffered a lot from anxiety and couldn't get to class. And do I excuse it? Do I not excuse it? Because it is a mental health issue. What is equal access for all the others that are dealing with their mental health and they are in class? So sometimes I battle that, and I just don't understand, what's fair, and where do I draw the line, I guess.
And that if it does become an issue,
Yeah.
if whether it's anxiety or anything else, if it becomes an issue, then that's a different story. And I often, when I open my semester, I will talk about those kinds of things. I often talk to my clinical students again. One of the best ways to deal with a lot of issues is informed consent at the very beginning, headed off at the pass. And I will talk to the class if there are any issues, any reasons, anything at all. Whether it's financial or logistics or anything, including those kinds of things like that, that will interfere with your ability to be in class, participate, understand, be able to benefit from, that I assure them it's safe and okay to come and talk to me about it, and that I will do everything in my ethical ability to help them, including, if it is something like that, referrals. And I will help, and I'll help execute referrals for students for any kind of professional assessment or intervention like that.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to add?
I was just going to say as well, I think proactively in the beginning of the class, letting them know these are things that I've seen, and if these are issues you're having, we have resources available to assist you on all those different levels. I think if you're communicating via email with a student, then I think it's perfectly appropriate to say, if you're having trouble, here are some resources that you may want to make contact with that might be able to assist and help you so that attendance doesn't continue to be a problem. And I think you can keep it fairly generic unless they want to share more. And then the more that they give you, the more that you can refer.
I have an access services blurb in my syllabus, so maybe I will add our counseling blurb.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll-
Perfect.
And when I go over it, I can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just make students feel, because it feels unsafe, it feels scary, it feels embarrassing. It's still, I often talk about, with medical issues, you know, Proctor First Care. You sprained your ankle, come to Proctor First Care, come to the St. Francis. But when it's the counseling center, it's kind of like the counseling center. It's down here, Bob. It's down here.
In the basement.
In the basement.
Sneak into the back door, nobody will see. And so it's still embarrassing. It's still, you know, those sanctions, and I want.
That stigma with access services.
And so that
Yeah.
stigma, and so one of the things I'll do from the very start, you know, make students, it's okay and it's safe to talk to me about those kinds of issues. And when students really believe that and feel that, they will avail themselves for that.
Amy, did you want to add?
That was my question too, but I have a little bit more I wanted to ask. Are there policies? I mean, you know, we have to have an attendance policy, we have to have a late work policy. Sometimes a student, even one with an accommodation, you know, they get more time to write. I teach writing, so, which is anxiety producing anyway for people who don't have issues with that. And also meeting deadlines can be an issue for people who don't have mental health issues. So are there policies that would help somebody with anxiety, with an anxiety disorder? I mean, can you think of a way that would help them rather than give them I mean, is it better to have a strict policy? Is it better to have a more individual policy? Is it, you know, what's the best way that would be welcoming to that student and not give them another problem?
Amy, would you like to tackle that
Is
one?
there an answer to that even?
Well, I don't know if, like, I would say that probably getting outside resources as far as how to cope and manage with the anxiety would probably be the best avenue. Like sending them like to the counseling department so that I could work with them. I don't know if a policy necessarily is going to, you know, mitigate the problem. I think it would probably be more teaching them those coping skills on how to handle that anxiety. And we do workshops here on anxiety that they could attend. They can come and see one of the counselors. So just giving them those resources, and we can work on it with them. But I don't know, is there any kind of like policy that you put in your syllabus? I don't think there is.
No, you'd have to be careful with that anyway. You
Yeah.
start to talk about those kinds of things, and then the next thing you know, you'd have to start to, if you're going to talk about anxiety disorder, if you're going to make a special policy for that, you'd have to make a special policy
Right.
for every possible affliction somebody could have.
Sure.
The other thing is,
I want to do that.
no, you,
I want to be more welcoming and like not just.
right, exactly.
Not give them like you said, don't give them a problem that they don't already have.
Never, and that's one of the issues, because, you know, there's a difference between being nervous about something and maybe state-dependent kinds of, study skills, a particular class, those kinds of things, versus the reality of a real, anxiety disorder. And being nervous about something doesn't mean anxiety disorder. And so, an individual, I hate to see sometimes what happens, the person who, they convince themselves that they have more anxiety or more nervous about things than they need to be, and they're gifted a diagnosis that explains that to them, and then they're taught how to be that diagnosis, and we start to kindle in more anxiety by teaching that person how to be with that anxiety. Does that make sense? I hate to see that happen with people too. And so I think that one of the first, if we were going to look at policies, one of the first things we'd have to do is distinguish between what is when do we consider this a nervous student, a student who has some problems in some areas, versus a person who's suffering an anxiety disorder.
Well, maybe we already have that distinction as far as, I don't have to know what it is. I just have to know if it's a problem, right? So
Right.
they either have an accommodation or they don't have it,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And so I guess I was just trying to make it easier for people. I don't know, my daughter has an anxiety
Mhm.
disorder that she takes medication for. She's had depression. Depression is a problem with students. I was an administrator at ISU, and it would often be, teachers would come, our grad students, teaching assistants would come with a student who had an attendance issue. And then I talked to the student and it was, oh, well, they're changing my medication. Or I'm just starting to see a counselor, or I can't go to class sometimes, and so that's how I was introduced to it in a school setting, other than at home. My daughter has her own issues and her own problems. you know, it will make you stop doing things. And so I understand when students say, I can't go to class.
Mhm.
I get it. But on the other hand, I've got 23 other students who can come to class. And so trying to be fair and trying to be helpful, so the accommodation helps, but if somebody comes to you and says, I've got these awful issues, what can I do? I guess the only thing really as a teacher you can do is tell them where they can get time management skills or where they could go to talk to a counselor. Is that not really it?
And sorry, go on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wondered how widespread is this? How many people are afflicted with this? Is it getting worse? Are there more and more people? Or I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You know, I just wanted to comment in a sense, not talking about policy about what you should do or anything like that, but if you look at it in the student or client or patient's perspective, however you want to label the person, many times they are anxious, many times they are depressed, many times they have other certain issues, and they're not, they won't spew out to you criteria that, okay, X, Y, and Z, so I have this disorder, that disorder. Many times they don't know that they're experiencing anxiety, other than they feel anxious. They don't understand how it's actually impacting them, because they don't have that insight into it. I mean, they just feel maybe awful or terrible, and it's manifesting in them not getting their work done. So there's some complexity there that has to be kind of nuanced, I feel, and that's why maybe I mean, I understand what you're talking about in terms of a policy. Like what do we do with folks with maybe XYZ disorder or this and that, but I just wanted to put it in the place of the student themselves, that they might be experiencing so many things that they have not put a label, that they're unable to put a label on at that point, versus some other students who have been diagnosed with other things, or they know their patterns and such. So you might be dealing with something separate from somebody who kind of knows what they're dealing with, even if they tell you, hey, I'm dealing with anxiety.
I think just to add to that before we go on is that you'll find that what you might find in the classroom setting when it comes to mental health issues might look a little different from an adult, a mature adult like myself. Younger people, like Jay is saying right now, and just to further your point, sir, how much do they know? And it's so, am I feeling an anxiety, this pressure, or am I just growing? Is it hormonal? Am I going through changes? What is it? So it looks different, and just to put out a blanket policy, now you're gonna have to demarcate further. So maybe just to add, because I see it more often now that you've, I don't know if I don't know if it's always been there, I don't know, but I think that the teachers, professors, administrators, doesn't matter. Maybe we just have to be a little bit more informed to navigate that plateau, maybe.
So in a sense, it's kind of like psychoeducation on both sides of the field would be quite important, because
I often try and help the student, because I'll help the student understand the situation. I'll help them understand how it's impacting them right now and how it's impacting their perception of the situation and their academic needs and demands. We'll lay out some plans, try and develop a way that this person can get through the semester, and hopefully successfully. And, you know, of course, the most important thing at that level would be that they succeed in that class and that semester. But I'll also help that student be able to make a decision whether or not they are prepared to continue with the semester at this point, and help them know that it's okay. Help them know it's okay if they can't.
Yeah.
Help them know that it's okay. This doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Sometimes they need to hear that.
And
That's
as a matter of
for sure,
fact,
because
I've had a student
the
say,
functional impairment.
that's right. I've congratulated them on their decision. That, you know, this is right now. This is a good decision, and do this and come back and be successful.
One of the things I struggled with as an administrator in public schools was if I had a student who was referred to a mental health institution, Methodist for example, they left my school and then they came back when they were fixed. The problem I had
More
with that
stable.
was is that mental health professionals are professionals in that area, and you know, I work with that student, my staff wasn't. So here's a student coming back from therapy, and there was no reentry information given to my staff. So I used to invite myself to the exit staffings of the hospitals. But is it gotten better? Is it still that way? There seems to be a gap between the student going and getting help, coming back to a school setting. I don't know if it's that way in colleges or not, 'cause I'm learning something every day about colleges that we're looking at. But do staff get that kind of orientation, how to help that student and how to prevent from doing some things that might make it worse?
Well, one of the things I know Anthony does, you do mental health first aid here for ICC. Do you provide it to faculty and staff?
Whenever they'd like it, we present it to all those modules.
Oh.
I've done a few of those sessions for, yes.
Yeah, because
And
we just had
students.
it on Bradley's campus, speaking from the administrative or the faculty side. We just did it with our student affairs department, did like a mental health first aid, which I think helps bridge that gap a little bit. We'd love for the faculty to also go through it because they're a lot of times making those referrals to us in the counseling center.
And we do some of that as staff
Yeah.
in servicing too, but mental health is so specific, it seems to me, to the individual. When an individual comes back, there's some things that some of my staff would do that inadvertently trigger
Yeah.
things with the kids, who cause problems in the school. And if they had known about some of those things, gotten information, maybe don't do this in the classroom because of prayer.
Ideally, I mean, if there's a counselor available for that person to have contact with the counselor once they come back and find out, you know, really what's going on. Because a lot of times the hospital's not gonna give you much. I mean, there have to be
Right. I know it's a lot of
releases
confidentiality
signed,
issues,
yeah.
too.
And even for us at a college level, they pretty much just say, yeah, they're okay to come back.
Yeah,
So there's
that's
other,
difficult.
but it's also like if they're gone very long in college, they're gonna have to drop this semester because too much time has been lost. Whereas, you know, I'm assuming through high school, they're still getting their assignments and getting things done, so.
So
It's
typically,
always a hard
yeah.
thing, re-injury with kids coming back
Mhm.
to college.
Well, and there's that stigma too. The kids, how much they want people to even know where they've been, what they've been doing, and how many people they want to be talking to them about it, to be sensitive to that as well. You know, may perceive it as a much more private issue that they don't. But I think using, as an administrator, educating the teachers and the staff with as much resources as you can on, you know, sensitivity and compassion and empathy for those kind of things, I think can go a long way.
Yeah, typically
As you would with anyone
here-
that's injured or ill.
Right.
Right.
Like typically here, what happens is Dean Points will send out an email to the professors of that student to let them know that they had a medical issue. Doesn't say mental health, she just says that there's been a medical concern and they've been in the hospital. So that way they know why they've missed and then she encourages the student to contact the professors when they return. But that's at this stage, like, and then these in-services, but other than that, like, that's where we're at currently.
Can I add to that just a little bit? So I was in a staff meeting, and there was another adjunct faculty there with me, and we had shared the same student, and they had kind of made a passive-aggressive comment to me about how I'm a helper, I'm a helper, that's me, so I was really lenient on the student, okay, and I excused everything, and I received emails that they were, you know, had some things going on, and I was more open, and I was sympathetic and empathetic, and I did all that, and so they felt very comfortable approaching me. But they did not feel very comfortable approaching the other person, and the other person was getting very nasty emails from the same student, and the student finally dropped my name and said, well, Instructor Godinez doesn't treat me this way, and she doesn't. So then I felt like I had set my colleague up, and I felt horrible, and she was like, you need to find a middle ground, and I was just a little bit more, I was taken back by it, because obviously maybe I was being too much of those things, because I allowed makeup, I strayed away from my syllabus and allowed the accommodations and maybe a little bit farther than that. You know, the homework wasn't necessarily deducted points for it being late due to an illness or due to being in the hospital or whatnot, so I strayed away. And then when my name got brought up to this other instructor, she said, can we have a conversation about this? And so we dialect and we had that conversation, and she was just like, you're making it hard for me being so lenient, and I'm trying to follow my syllabus, and I'm trying to keep everything fair. So can anybody speak to that?
Well, it's really
college to
into
college.
each instructor's individual decision.
Right.
on-
Yeah, and so then I
And,
felt that, I
um,
mean, but I understood their point, I thought it
Right.
was very valid.
Right.
And I was like, wow, so, okay,
Yeah.
now how do I approach this?
Yeah, the consistency is so important, but you also have to take each individual situation into
And I
account.
understood what she was trying to do too, and
Right.
she care for her class, so,
Right.
and then, I don't know, I just.
Yeah, I will email
I felt
professors.
awkward
Yeah, I'll email professors on behalf of the student who's struggling, and oftentimes I will get 5 different responses on what they're able to do for that student.
Well,
Some will
that makes
say
me
it's.
feel better that you
yeah.
guys experienced that too.
Oh, yeah.
Because I
Oh,
was
yeah.
just like, oh, wow.
Well, and
okay,
for
no
the
problem.
college level,
I took
I-
it on then,
yeah.
it became my problem.
Yeah, but I think for the college student, each class they're taking is going to have different requirements and different expectations. I think that's, it's going to be hard to make that pretty universal. And so, we always ask, is it salvageable? Can they make this up? Is there anything you can do to help them? And some will say, absolutely, just have them reach out to me. And some will say, no, they're failing, they won't be able to pass it, so they need to drop it. I mean, they'll be pretty specific with us, and then I just communicate that back to the student, and then we kind of go from there.
And you probably did, but really checking with the student, what do you feel capable of doing? And trying to be very honest with yourself.
Sure.
How much can you do?
Right.
Well, and I always inform them before we even send those emails. It is the professor's decision on what can be made up and what cannot be made up. And so then we'll base our decisions, once you get that back, on those responses. But you can't just assume they're all going to have the same blanketed response. So I think you handled it the way that you needed to for your classroom, and she handled it the way she needed to for
Right.
her classroom.
I just didn't like the tension then between.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Understandable.
It's awkward, it's awkward, I don't like that, so.
Heidi, do you experience any type of tension at all like this in the Center for Reviews in this area?
The only thing I was thinking, just to add to that, just from some of the college age students that I've worked with, or even younger age than that, is I think, kind of to normalize again that your response may be different than another professor's given the limitations of your classroom versus theirs. But I think the varying responses that a student receives given their particular issue, whether it be a mental health issue, a medical issue, a death in the family, et cetera, whatever it may be, those varying responses, I think, are part of kind of navigating adulthood too.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, for the students here, all being adults, it's a part of learning that you may get a different response from a support person here
Exactly.
than you may over here, and that kind of adapting to that and learning to be adaptive in that way is actually, a healthy
Yeah,
approach.
it's
So.
not black or white,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
right.
all this way or
Yeah.
that way. Because I think sort of accidentally, inadvertently, that student split the two of you. And,
Very much so.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think another question? Someone? I'll just, a question for the panel, anyone? I do have some reserved questions that Amy drew up. Well, collectively, I read them a bit. We'll go with them, all right? And please feel free, if it sparks a question within you, you could follow up or change it, okay? All right, this is open to the whole panel. What are some of the most common mental health disorders for college students? The most common ones, and
the most common right now are anxiety disorders, followed by depression.
and how are
And
those?
probably substance abuse.
Yeah, third, yeah. And how would that play out in the classroom, Dan? How do you see that in the classroom?
Well, everything we've talked about, it interrupts the student's ability to participate, and it interrupts sometimes the classroom's ability to provide the environment or the information in a way that is necessary for all the students. And if it's a problem, it has to be identified. I think that anxiety, depression are the two big ones, and then right on top of that, and sometimes even more so if the student's intoxicated at the time of the
Yeah.
class, substance use, and people who are under the influence during class sessions.
With depression, it's more of a withdrawal and a lack of motivation, so it's just like they almost feel like they can't go to class or do their work. Whereas the anxiety, there can be more avoidance. I think that might have been what you were touching on. Maybe people not coming to class, and we see this pattern over and over again where they miss a few classes and then they start getting very apprehensive about going back into the class, thinking about, what is the professor going to think? What is the rest of the people going to think? And they feel so self-conscious that they avoid it even more, and then they just get deeper and deeper in a hole. And then we see them like 2 months into the semester where, they've not been going to class all this time, and it's like, okay, so they really have to challenge that avoidance. You can't use the anxiety as a reason to not push yourself to go do those things, because it will get worse and worse and worse.
And the substance abuse, we oftentimes are trying to determine if there's an underlying mental health issue. Are we dealing with a college kid who's found his freedom or her freedom and is experimenting with alcohol and other illegal substances and having a fabulous time but forgetting to go to class, and then not having such a fabulous time because now they're on academic probation or parents are bringing them home to do, a recheck. Or if they're using substances because of an anxiety or depression or sexual assault or some other kind of trauma, and so, we don't always know what we're looking at until they get in the office. And unfortunately, too, sometimes that is after half the semester has gone on and somebody's pointed it out. But I wanted to kind of go back to what her question was about also. I think just having open dialogue, kind of in the beginning, about if you're concerned. I think having an open dialogue and being approachable, and if you really are concerned about somebody, doing it in private and going up to them and just being like, I'm just concerned, I haven't seen you, if there's anything, I don't think you have to dig or, do therapy, but I think it's perfectly helpful for them to know that there's somebody that maybe they can talk to. So.
Someone's noticed, someone
Yeah,
cares.
somebody's noticed. I think that's huge.
How can you tell if a student has a mental health concern or is just playing you for time, getting a better grade?
I think, college students don't always look like they've showered, or they don't always dress up for class. But I think if you see sort of a systematic problem of being very unkept, I think chronic absences, I think a decline in their work, if they started off doing well, now they're not. Mental health stuff will sometimes, that's where it's going to sort of rear itself is their first maybe year in college, if they maybe didn't exhibit those symptoms in high school because they had a better support system. So, you're looking for probably absences and hygiene and self-care and a decrease in quality of work, I would think are your top 3 things you're going to want to look for.
Another thing you're going to look at, pay attention to, is that student's verbal behavior in class. Relevance of participation, questions, their reactions, the tangentiality sometimes even, or some of the other things that you may notice as a student is participating, asking questions, responding to issues as part of that verbal behavior in the classroom. Paying attention to that.
Can I touch on that real quick? So I've had a student who has multiple disabilities in a class, including anxiety, depression, but some Asperger's, and feels the need to pace and speaks out loud and can be very disruptive quickly. What about the other students that are witnessing it? How do you help them not become fearful? Because some people then, that will make them nervous because in the world we live today, they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What do we do? So without breaking one confidentiality, how do you kind of say to the class, it's fine, this is, how do you control your class while taking care of the situation at the same time? Because there's the others that have to bear witness to this mental health issue.
I try and respond, normalize the response, normalize what the person is doing. I may take advantage of talking about the variety of different ways that people communicate. I will keep it as focused on the interaction. Now, again, if it's something that's becoming a problem or interfering with or a danger, that's one thing. You have to react to that. But if it's just a person whose verbal behavior is just something that may make other people uncomfortable, I'll try and normalize that. Make it a part of. Roll with it.
Right. So in teaching at night, you don't necessarily have a phone, or you don't have somebody next to you, or you don't have people in the hallway that you could just say, hey, so you are alone sometimes, in a dark hallway, and you're trying to control it, but that's, I mean, definitely, sometimes I have not given it attention because sometimes it's attention seeking, and then sometimes I've had to absolutely address it, but trying to keep the others from becoming upset and nervous about it too was also a challenge that I faced.
Jay, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, you brought up a important point about the confidentiality for the student as well. So it'd be good to have a conversation with the student because they're going to continue to repeat these repeat the behaviors possibly. So about what their expectations are, and if they know if others in the class know about it, and maybe just be open and be, how do you
Right.
want us to address
Kind of
this?
evident at this point
Yeah.
that something is a little
Yeah.
not.
So
Right.
I would engage them to see where they want to go with it,
Mhm.
because sometimes you may have your hands tied behind your back if they.
I kind of felt like
So.
that, and they couldn't control it either, so it was
Yeah.
definitely, it wasn't like they needed to be seen by a dean for they weren't in
Right.
Yeah.
trouble, it was
Right.
just disrupt, so then they deserve the right to be there too, so I was just trying to keep everybody calm at the same time about them. I just said, if you have to get up and go, I just asked to pace in the hallway, like, if you need to have a moment, just do you mind walking out? No need to say anything, raise your hand, just kind of get up and go, and, so.
I think going back to the I think the previous question, how do you tell if somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes versus actually having a legitimate problem? I think in terms of the behavior, it's difficult to continue, I guess, that type of malingering behavior or that type of behavior if you don't have that behavior, unless the person's antisocial or really good professional or some kind of professional at it. So I would say look at you could look at the patterns of behaviors, which others did allude to on the panels. But sometimes it does get a little bit trickier on that. Sometimes some people are, for example, some people are what we call socially anxious, don't like big groups of people, don't like get very anxious around big groups of people and this and that. But they've learned how to they've learned some compensatory skills that help them that much. But that doesn't mean they're not suffering inside. So it can get tricky at times.
Just one point, just to add to what you were asking. I think the situation you just described to the panel, that's a fluid situation. I think that's what everyone's trying to allude to as well, or say. That's really difficult because you do have the good of the many, even though you do have an issue that's presented here. How much of that issue can you allow to continue? And then you would make a decision, but the fact that you're here listening to the experts equips you to deal with that a lot better. A lot better.
I have a kind of a hypothetical. I had a student that had Asperger's, and his parents wanted him to go to school and not tell anybody that he was Asperger's.
I experience that on a daily basis.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then, and I certainly understand the parent's spirit. They're no longer going to be there with him. They don't feel like they're able to protect or support, and yet he was starting to have some interpersonal relationship challenges. And I finally asked him. I said, "Well, do your friends know that you have Asperger's?" And he shared this with me. And I said, "I think you can alleviate a lot of issues if you would be more open with your friends." And it changed like night and day. And instead of students being concerned or worried about his behavior, they were able to show a lot more compassion and and really become friends and not be like, what is happening?
In our office,
Like you
we've had
said,
people
scared.
misconstrue
Yes.
behaviors for a relation, and it wasn't that way at all. It was just
Exactly.
a behavior of a,
Right,
so.
because this student is much more than his diagnosis of that,
Absolutely.
and I'm like, yeah.
Person
So,
first,
yeah, so I'm like, I think if you share this a little bit more about yourself with your friends, then I think it's going to alleviate some of those, like, what just happened, conversations. So
Yeah.
it made a
they
difference.
notice. They're
Yeah,
noticing.
yeah.
It's just then
Absolutely.
it helps them to understand, oh, okay, like light bulb comes on.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. So
Right.
yeah, completely. If they're willing to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, another question that's here. How often are college students, or people at the center as well, assaulted? And how will this impact them? How often are they assaulted by other people suffering?
How often are you assaulted?
Well, I think when
Victimized?
victimized is what when I wrote the question. That's what I meant.
So, overall, like in the United States, I can't speak about colleges and others, but just looking at it, many people like to point fingers at mental health for causing commotion in the country in one way or another. But the truth is, the likelihood of somebody who has a mental illness is many more times likely to be victimized than an individual who is not. So we do
To
want to
harm
keep that in mind.
themselves versus other people.
Yeah, harm themselves versus
Mhm.
other people as well as, you know, we try to point responsibility of certain crimes and other things to the mental illness. It's not necessarily the case. We do see people with mental health being more the victims of those crimes than committing them. So that is just something I want to throw out there, because I think some people have a fear that, and this might not be PC, but say, oh my God, that guy's crazy, you know, we have to be careful of this and that, when, you know, the person next to you could be a serial killer, right? So.
So gathering what you just to reiterate, and make sure we understand, is that you're saying that someone who suffers from mental health illness is more likely to be victimized by other people or victimize themselves than they are to victimize other people?
Yeah.
That's correct.
That's what you're
Right.
saying?
That's correct.
Great.
And usually with somebody, if somebody does act out in a dangerous way, usually it's not because they're bad people because they have a mental illness. It's usually because they're protecting themselves. They're in a situation where they believe that what they're doing is a way to protect themselves. And so you have to look at it, it's not a malicious, I want to hurt somebody kind of a thing. It's trying to protect themselves. And so then that means help that person feel safe so they don't need to feel like they need to protect themselves.
I would just add to that from a different assault perspective,
Yeah.
that, you know, college age students, regardless of mental health, because of the age that they are, early adulthood is actually one of the highest levels of victimization for males and females for sexual assault and domestic violence. So it's a you know, a time of life that there's obviously a lot of transition happening, or you know, relationships starting on an intimate level, sometimes on a higher level than before, and add into a lot of other risk factors at that age as well. But the statistics are the highest at college age for intimate partner violence and sexual assault issues.
Well, and I don't think we have to look too far than our current events right now with the #MeToo campaign and other things like that happening, that we know it's happening considerably more often than what we realize or what's being reported. And I think just continuously advocating for students who are experiencing those things is important.
Do you feel, as an institution or a business, nonprofit, that we're doing enough to learn, educate ourselves to help students and customers and clients?
I think there's always more that can be done. Yeah.
What would you say could be done further? Like at school, Amy, what could we do at ICC, at Illinois Central College? If you had your way for a day, what would you try to implement? Not to put you on a spot, but what would you try to do to alleviate or raise the level of concern?
I mean, I think as an educational institute, like the biggest step is educating. And the issue with like our college is that we're a commuter college, so we don't get a lot of students to attend these kind of sessions where you can, you know, learn about the different topics. Like for instance, like with sexual assault, really it needs to be primary prevention, not secondary. What we do is we teach like girls like, you know, self-defense and things of that nature, watch for this or watch your drink, and that's great because we're trying to protect, but it's the people that are assaulting that need to learn how to, and the majority of people that assault are males. There are females that do as well, but learn respect for other people and, you know, knowing what consent looks like and what that means. But we can't really provide that to them if they're not attending and they're not hearing that information. So I think like really attendance, and I think like as faculty and staff, encouraging those students like in whatever way you can to be a part of that. We do monthly events here on different mental health topics. This month coming up is February. We're doing Eating Disorder Month, and every week we do an event. But we only get a very small like microcosm of our population to come to that, and it's usually the same students. And they're always like, huh?
Maybe some type of a mandatory module that they have to watch before they can enroll or something.
Right. Right.
Or
So
extra
you know,
credit.
you know it's it's
Lots of
happened
extra
or something.
credit.
Extra credit's a
Encourage,
beautiful thing.
Yes.
So.
So how do you get the information out to them? I mean, do they have to on the ICC website? Do they have to hunt for it, or do big announcements pop up?
For the events, here, like at ICC, what we found so far is like doing just tabling events, like where we're catching traffic flow. Because usually if we schedule something, then people don't always attend. We've done panels. The Center for Prevention of Abuse, actually, like several people from the center came last April to talk about sexual assault and the college population and how college students are impacted, and it was open to faculty, staff, and students, and we send that out to all faculty and staff like through their emails and advertise around campus. But it's just really difficult to get people scheduled and get them to come. So we try to do a little mixture of everything to hit as many people as we can. But typically it's tabling events, so they can stop by. I can talk to them one-on-one, give them information, pamphlets from local resources, and things like that. And then we always do an event because they love events. So
I don't know about ICC if you're able to do this, but at Bradley, all incoming freshmen are highly required or encouraged, I don't know if it's required, to take an EHS class, which is a freshman experience class. And it covers mental health, navigating, introducing them to the resources on campus. I mean, it covers, the academic success. I mean, there's tons of different things and it's a 1-credit class, it's a pass-fail.
and we have the ICC 110.
Are they
right?
required to?
They're not. They're encouraged to take that, and it's got the similar kind of. What you
And then
were
the
saying.
other venue or avenue for this age is also social media. You know, more, our wellness center certainly uses Facebook and other things to put out promotions and information and dedication to different themes and months. We also do the back of doors and restrooms, and then, whether you use Twitter or Instagram. I mean, there's just, college students are on their phones all the time, which is also potentially another mental health issue. But but then the other thing with mental health stuff too is that at Human Service Center we had a grant where we were able to do some mental health access so students could get online and learn about anxiety and depression. It was mobile wellness. That grant ended, but now OSF just started one too, and it's called Silver Cloud. And it's a free, confidential, run by licensed therapists. It covers depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress. I don't know, but it's just started at OSF, and there's stress in general and stuff like that. So sometimes, both prevention and information, but then also other ways to access services and support for students. I think utilizing media and social media, as much as I would like to resist this, it's, meeting them where they're at too is important.
And we do have a website, counseling dedicated strictly to counseling with resources on it, but it is kind of like buried within our website. So I always say just put it in the search bar. You'll find it if you put it in the search bar. So.
I have a question. I teach psychology, so I get students talking about these issues. So I had a student some years back who had recurrent big-time anxiety issues. I guess she had an outside therapist. No, she did not have an outside therapist. She was popping up at the student support center a lot and had an academic counselor or some sort of counselor. And at one point they said, "I'm sorry, Crystal, we can't deal with these sorts of heavy-duty issues. You need to go elsewhere." So where do ICC counselors stand with people like Crystal now? Does anybody really do therapy here? How do you handle if a student really opens up with big-time issues? Where do you draw the line?
Right.
Things like that?
We do so when they come in, I do an informed consent with them, just letting them know the kinds of services that we provide. And we do what's called brief solution focused therapy. So we're really more of a short-term, kind of like a triage model in a way.
I was going to say more triage and assessment. And then
it's more like assessment.
Crisis
intervention. If we can take care of it in 3 to 5 sessions, and that's even in the informed consent, then we'll do that and that's our scope. Like within that 3 to 5 sessions, if we can take care of whatever the concern is,
So there is
wonderful. But
you just don't let them.
no, we don't just send them on their way. And then if we see that it's like a chronic concern that's going to take a little bit more than what we can provide here, then we do a referral, and then we see them through the referral process. So like Crystal maybe was a little reluctant to go outside of here, it sounds like, in the first place. So she might have been a little reluctant when the counselor here said, okay, I think it's time to move forward. And I usually, I come from Bradley where we kept them a little longer. So it's very hard for me to do just the 3 to 5 sessions. But I usually will continue to see them until they get to that referral source. And sometimes it takes a little longer than the 3 to 5 sessions because they drag their feet a little bit. But I want to ensure that they get that continued care. That's like the biggest thing, is just making sure we make that transition together. So yes, we do have that available.
And I've received referrals from Amy
Yes.
in the community.
I have,
So.
yeah.
I can say just for Amy's side, I know a few times over the past year or two, Amy's actually spoken to several people. I've referred to her, and over the weekend, Amy, just for you here, I didn't tell you, I saw one of the past individuals, and they're happy. They're at Western. They're graduating in a year.
I know who
So
that
you do
is.
see some success stories with this, but it's always buried within the negativity that goes with it. But there are some really powerful stories out there that just makes you feel really good inside when you see them. And he was at the gym and he was happy and talked away. You know, just, like, oh, stop, slow down. I'll get you to Amy next week. No. So I have seen Amy do this, and I have seen it work, and I feel really good about that. Jay, did you want to add?
No, I think covered it pretty well. You know what? I will add something. I think so. We're looking at the college level here. We do see it's common. Like suicide is a common thing. I think on the graduate, undergraduate level, and like even in medical schools around the United States. And so what we see is that there might be resources over here, right, and then the individuals over here. And as they were speaking before earlier, you know, it's that part in the middle, it's that gap. It's like, how do we, I don't know, in a sense, market this? How do we pull them in to know that, okay, this is available? How do we get them to that point? And I think that's some of the that's some of the most difficult things to do. And
Some of it's towards that destigmatization too.
Part of it,
It's
yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah, because for the individual to seek help, but then it's like, you know, as I went on previously, what if the person doesn't have insight into their illness, and then they're just kind of, or doesn't know what is exactly going on, they don't know how to reach out either. So it's that middle piece. It's that middle piece. I think that we all want to improve and get better. So then we could combine, so join the two together, so make it easier.
And very often, I think one of the problems with that and getting that person into the appropriate continuing or other care, extended care, they're very often focused on the here and now, which is, I want to pass this class. I want to not feel this way right now. I want to this, and helping them see the relationship between that and that more long-term, sometimes more in-depth focus kind of an approach is going to be a challenge. You have to help that student see that relationship.
I'll use one of the questions from here. I was going to ask a different one. I'll save that one. On average, in a classroom setting, the students that do present or exhibit the signs of a mental health issue, your primary concern at that point is what? Dan?
Safety. First of all, immediate safety for the student and anybody else around. And second, the integrity of their academic, their current academic situation and their academic goals. And then third, my ability to help them negotiate the system in a way that they can get what they need, in a way that will promote that success. Most important, safety, the here and now safety.
Well, I was going to say, it's difficult too when we're talking about identifying students, because most people that have these illnesses aren't standing out necessarily, especially in my area with eating disorders. You know, they're going to look fine, they're going to be perfectionistic. I'm being very general here, but sometimes the more ill they get, the better they're doing in their classes, so you're not going to see a decline in grades, so it's going to look different with different types of issues. So
What's
it's
your
very hard to
creative
identify.
peeve with mental health issues in your various areas of concern?
What was the question?
What's your biggest pet peeve of mental health issues, whether it's other people or a procedure, a policy? What is your greatest or your biggest peeve?
It used to be insurance. Currently, that's not the case. I feel, you know.
Yeah, we don't have to deal with that
So that may change again.
That's a true.
That may change again.
That's
But
definitely
more people have access to mental health care right now than they've ever had, but hopefully that we can keep that, so.
I think I would just add to that, I think it's just what was kind of mentioned earlier regarding that, the notion that if people don't feel it applies to them, they're not taking in the information. So, you know, whether it be sexual assault or domestic violence or a mental health diagnosis, when we're trying to educate in the community or we're on the news to talk about a specific issue, that I still see a pretty high level of tune out when it comes to those kinds of things, because people immediately just have a thought of, it doesn't apply to me, therefore I don't need to hear it. And, you know, so I think we talked about the idea of education and how do we have more people become more sensitive to this, and I think being open to the topics is the first problem.
Any more questions? Do I have any more questions you'd like to ask at this point?
I'd add to that too, like victim blaming, I think is one of my biggest pet peeves. Like even like amongst educated people, I've had conversations about like how to handle like sexual assault cases here, and just like some of the ways people respond, to me is shocking, but that I work in that field. So like then I'm like, I can't see how you can see it that way. So then that you know, makes it a little difficult. So just trying to educate them and understand that they're just coming from a different perspective. Like you're kind of living, eating, and breathing it. So I understand like this victim didn't ask to have somebody put something in their drink. Well, they should have like put something over their drink, you know, like they should, you know, they shouldn't dress that way, or so the victim blaming is a little frustrating to me.
Who's
The sad
responsible?
part is that that's so much entwined in the culture. It's so cultural. That goes back to what Amy or maybe Melissa, who said it was talking about primary and secondary. I can't, it's down the line. I can't
Primary
remember.
prevention. Yeah.
Right. The culture.
You know, another
Do we
thing,
start
though?
in primary school with that? And then this would bail aggression. So even as it relates to mental health issues and getting rid of the stigma starting then, because I still think that we make jokes and we laugh at words.
Oh, yeah.
You know, look at Looney Tunes. We grew up with that word. Looney Tunes, a cartoon, and I just thought about it the other day. And you see these things like that, and you say, and we just write it off, and we say, they're just joking. Really? But you don't joke about the leukemia lady,
Right.
the cancer cat. No, you don't. You don't make jokes about that because they're not funny. Culture. Sure. I'm just wondering. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I think another thing though is, because I agree, victim blaming, but then on top of that, I think a mistake we make is an individual, and we're talking about now, you know, somebody who the recipient of misbehavior from somebody else or something like that, natural disasters or something that could fall into it also. But what happens is that, you know, somebody suffers a trauma, they're going to have problems. They're going to have an adjustment period. They're going to have feelings. They're going to have emotions. And very often what we do, instead of addressing that, you know, and understanding that this person's going through this, we just can't wait to get the pad out to give them their disease or disorder. It's, I'm here to help you, here's your new disease. And that we have to stop. We are so overzealous. We are overzealous promoters of everybody. Every time somebody has a bad day, we want to, what disease, what disorder do they have? And you know, sometimes just let a person have a bad day. Let's not over disease disorderify everything. And I think that we promote people thinking that way, and I think some of the malingering and some of that stuff results from some of that too. I mean, people can learn. You know, you give somebody a disorder they don't need to have. They get that disorder. They get that label. They learn how to take advantage of that. Don't be surprised when they do whatever it takes to take advantage of that. And I'm not saying that people don't have. These very real mental disorders, problems are there and happen. But it's not that everybody who has a bad day, and it's not that everybody who has a bad thing happen to him or her, means that they now suddenly have a disorder. And I think we have to stop that. We have to stop that.
When we brought mental health first aid on campus, I remember one of the reasons why I really wanted the faculty and staff to also participate in it is I cannot tell you the number of times we do triage sessions every afternoon. Like if there's a crisis, we keep slots open. And the number of faculty and staff that will call us because there's a student in their office crying and want them to come over to the counseling center right away. And I'm like, well, why are they crying? well, I don't know why they're crying. I'm like, well, that doesn't mean they need a therapist. They might just need an ear, you know?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
if you actually talk to them and listen to why they were crying, maybe their dog died, maybe they got an F on a chemistry test. It's not the end of the world. If they heard from you that it's not the end of the world and that it's going to be okay, and you know, go talk to your friends or go work out at the gym or go take a nap because you haven't slept in a couple nights because you were, you know, instead of walking them over to the therapist, you know, and then they come in my office and they're just like, I'm fine. I'm like, well, I know you're fine, and I know you're going to be fine, and I'm fine with being the ear. I have no problem with being the ear, but I think I think on college campuses we talk a lot about how we shuffle students off to the necessary department and, you know, end up becoming pretty compartmentalized, whereas if we took the time to engage and interact with the student longer than 5 minutes, we would probably realize they don't need another department, because you probably have more information than you realize as an adult and as somebody who's navigated college once before, and can probably help them out in 5 or 10 minutes. And it's just, I think we are doing more of that, but I think we should be okay with doing more of that. You know, I'll spend 20 minutes talking about, you know, tutoring. Even, you know, I'm not a tutor, and please don't ask me to tutor you, especially in math. But I can certainly help them find that without them feeling like I'm just gonna, well, I'm not that, so go here. You know. So.
Well, at this point, but at the time now, it's 3:45, and I would like to give you, each of you the opportunity for a closing statement. We could start here.
Trying to think of what else I haven't said. I guess I would just add the topic that was just kind of last in terms of just general mental health issues. We are a labeling society. And so, you know, I think that's one of the things, one of the many things actually I love about working at the center with the client population that we have, is that even though we're all mental health therapists, all trained in assessment, all trained in the diagnosing piece of our work, that we don't actually label and diagnose the clients that we work with, and we have that luxury because of how we're funded, which I know is very rare anymore in the mental health field. But we work with people who walk through our doors because they're victims of a crime. And so it's absolutely freeing to us as a therapist, to the client that we're sitting in front of, that we don't have to get out the labels. They may have been labeled in some other part of the medical field or in another mental health situation, and we know that's important, unfortunately, for insurance reasons. But in terms of the relationships that we're able to have, we can kind of set that piece aside and only address it as the client feels that it's important to them as they need to work through that. So just approaching everyone who walks through the door, knowing everyone is different, everybody has different issues, and kind of starting from that initial contact, working on what they identify their needs as, instead of a scripted set of things that we're capable of doing. And so always striving towards being as open and welcoming as possible within the community for that reason.
Well, like I said, I've said several times, you know, let us not stick our head in the sand. Mental health issues, disorders, the problems that are real, and they need to be addressed properly when that's the case. But at the same time, it's not that everybody that has a problem means that they have a mental disease or disorder. Don't give a person a problem, a disorder, a disease they don't need to have.
And I think the more that we talk about mental health and not, you know, make it like mental health is here and above. I mean, we're all encapsulated in our body, you know. The more that we talk about it and people get comfortable with it, the better off we're all going to be. One of the things I would love to have is they have these little mental health kiosks where students can go up and just play around on these kiosks and get all this information and, you know, sort of do screening things on themselves. And I would just love to have that, like in our student center, just to make it like, you can talk about this, you can think about this, you can check yourself, you know, and that's where I hope things will go.
I think that's funny. My daughter, when she was 13, did that on the computer and came to me with like 4 diagnoses. I'm like, no, you do not have borderline. You're just 13.
That's it. 13 is borderline.
You're just a 13-year-old girl, hormonal. You're fine. Don't worry. In a few years, you'll feel better. So yes, as much as I agree with that, I think it's a dangerous slippery slope. Don't let your 13-year-old on it. But I love being a therapist, and so I think that, refer your students to me. That's what I'll say.
And I would say, like, just kind of reiterating what Melissa had said, like, just be open to your students and be a kind and caring ear, because, I mean, we're all going through things. Whether you have mental health issues or they're not mental health, like Dan was saying, they're not always disorders, but every one of us are human, and we have bad days, and we get F's on tests, and no one's perfect, and so we might just need like somebody to just listen to us for a minute, and that can make a huge difference in the world. And if it goes beyond that and you feel overwhelmed with it and it's not something that's within your scope, then we have those resources here. Please send them our direction. So.
Yeah. On a final note, I would say teach someone something that you learned today, because I think one of the biggest takeaways from here is that we need more psychoeducation in the community, in our culture, period. So teach someone something. Hopefully they teach that to somebody else and get the conversation going.
I'd like to thank all of you for coming.
Thank
First
you.
of all, I really appreciate it. The crowd size doesn't matter to us. And I want to thank the distinguished panel, because even standing here and listening to you all articulate yourselves, I felt good. Not because I'm hearing what I want to hear, because I heard so much I never heard before as well, because I'm not an expert in this. And it's just a pleasure to hear you and to learn from you today as well. So again, thank you.
Thank you.